Hello, I am not your lawyer. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. This is the place where I talk about current cases in the news, topics relating to law, etc., based on my lengthy experience practicing law in California, and that's specifically what I talk about. Again, I'm not your lawyer. This is just for entertainment purposes only. I never would talk about actual cases that I have. I just talk for entertainment purposes about cases that I have no relation to that are happening in California, because that's where I'm most familiar. I am licensed to practice law in Massachusetts, by the way, but I'm not as familiar with the laws there because I have not, for any extended period of time, practiced there. So just California. Alrighty. Credit for time served. How often you're listening to a podcast about a true crime story, or you're watching Dateline or whatnot, and they say like, well, while he was convicted, the judge just gave him time served. That's it, he got out. And it's always with kind of this judgmental tone of like, it's awful, these judges, what are they doing? So what does it mean that somebody got time served? Let's break it down. Before we do that, what are we thinking of the navy and the green? I was in court the other day, and I was wearing a navy and green combo. It was a different blouse, but the same jacket. And two other female attorneys were in this color combo. I'm thinking we like this color combo. It kind of, I don't know, I usually do black with the green, but yeah, and you know what the forest green looks really good with too is camel. So anyhow, but that's, yeah, fit check. Okay, credit for time served, what does it mean? We live in the United States. One of our most cherished values from the time of the founding of the country is we don't just throw people in jail and keep them there for no reason. If somebody is held, they're entitled to credit for those days they're held. Nobody and nothing is going to take those days away from them. So if somebody is physically in custody, that would mean, they're at the jail, they're physically in custody, they are getting credit for that time. And here in California, for the vast majority of cases, it would be what's called 4019 time. It's Penal Code 4019, and that is 2 for 1. What that means is if somebody is sentenced to 180 days, they would serve 90 days of it. That is in the California Penal Code. It is what the judge is permitted to sentence somebody under, and you're entitled to that time. Now that is for good behavior. A jail or prison could, if somebody isn't behaving the way they should, they're fighting, they're doing things they're not supposed to do, they could have that credit taken away from them, but generally they're just going to get the time credits. And at a facility, they have their own rules and policies, so it is common that the judge can they're legally sentencing them under California sentencing guideline to, let's say somebody's getting 180 days and they're going to get 4019 time. They're only going to serve 90 days of it at the facility who's holding them, which is the jail. The jail says, we're too crowded, we're going to release the person. And they generally have some policy of the order in which they release people early. And in California State Prison, which also very, very crowded, generally people who are serving under 4019 time, which would be like, let's say they get a 2-year state prison sentence, they would serve half, which would be 1 year, but California cuts it down further, so somebody serving under 4019 time would actually only serve 33% of the time, not 50%. So other types of time credits somebody could get. So California has the 3 strikes law that I'm sure everybody has heard about. One of the elements of the 3 strikes law is if you already have a strike from your past record, and then now you have a new felony offense, and you admit, yes, I have a prior strike. In 2012, I got convicted of residential burglary. Now I'm here on whatever felony. I am going to plead guilty. It effectively doubles their sentence, and that sentence must be served at 80%, 80%. So, and at state prison, they recalculate that down to 66%. There are also some charges that must be served at 85%. So serious and violent, great bodily injury. So if somebody commits a robbery, or if somebody commits a crime and the victim was injured to the point that it's considered great bodily injury, those have to be served at 85%. So why are we hearing about the judge, at the time of sentencing, they were convicted, but the judge just released them on time served? Because you're entitled to your time credits from the day you're arrested. And the wheels of justice grind very, very, very slowly. So if a person is, and the judge has to sentence under the law. So every crime that is in the penal code has, it's called a sentencing triad that goes with it. So let's say somebody is charged with felony vandalism. They could be sentenced by a judge to probation locally in a county jail, and that would be probation and a number of days up to a year, and they're put on probation. They could be sentenced to 16 months. They could be sentenced to 2 years. They could be sentenced to 3 years, and the 16 to 3 is in prison. There's some other nuances to it, but in essence, that is what's happening. The judge can't just say, this feels like 6 years. The judge may say, this feels like 6 years, but there needs to be a way to get to that number based on the charges and what the person is charged with and what is alleged under the facts of the case. So somebody they're coming before the judge, they're either sentenced after trial or they're pleading, and it's time for sentencing. The judge is going to say, okay, what are their credits? How many days have they been in jail? And it's very common for somebody, by the time they get all the way to trial, it's lengthy. They've already been through many conferences to try to resolve the case, and then their case has gone to preliminary hearing, and then there's been pre-trial negotiations, and then you get to the day of trial. It could take a year to get to the day of trial. Somebody could have 365 actual days in custody. So if it's now they went to trial, they lost, they're being sentenced, they could receive a sentence, but they now have all the credits. So they are being sentenced to whatever length of time. And I realize it could feel very unsatisfying to somebody who's not serving the time themselves in custody, that, they're just going to get out. Like, they're not going to get any time. But that's not the case. They kind of effectively pre-served their time. And little sidebar note, that is something that actually does happen commonly, is as the case moves on and on and on, as the person amasses time credits and they become weary of trying to fight the case or whatnot, it's the temptation that, gee, if I just pled guilty right now, I would get out today because I have the time credits. So in any case, that is what's happening. As crazy as it seems, when you hear about a case in the news, and then you kind of hear like, oh, the such and such, whatever case is going to trial. And it feels to us, because we're just, reading about it in the paper or hearing about it on the news, but while that time is passing, that person is sitting in jail, they are serving their time. So it's not like they're not serving the time, they're serving it in an actual penal institution, whether it's the county jail waiting, and then after the sentence, it would be state prison, but the time is being served. So credit for time served is a concept that everybody's entitled to and should be, because you're serving the time. There's no, it's not fake or like fraudulent or anything like that. It's something legitimately enshrined in our laws that you're entitled to the days you're in. And I think if you think about it, we would all agree that's an important principle. That's part of our American tradition, is that we don't just, round people up and lock them away until we can get them to trial. They're getting credit for that time while they're awaiting their trial. So hope that clarifies a little bit. And I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Remember it. Tell a friend. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.